Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omar. Once again, Indian armed forces have carried out indiscriminate and unprovoked heavy firing at civilian populated areas across the line of control, killing 5 civilians and 1 Pakistani soldier. Now, this event took place on Saturday, to which the Pakistani government has strongly protested. In fact, the Indian charge d'affaires was summoned and an official complaint was lodged. At the same time, what is interesting is that the Indian Chief of Army Staff during the weekend, Bipin Rawat, claims that India did this over the weekend in this crossfire, destroying terrorist camps in Azad Kashmir, a claim so far substantiated only by his own words. Now, Pakistan has responded with various tweets by the DG, ISPR, the Director General of Pakistan's media wing of the armed forces. Let me just read out what he said. The propensity of false claims by senior Indian military leadership, especially since Pulwama incident, is detrimental to peace in the region. Such false claims by Indian Army are being made to suit vested domestic interests. This is against professional military ethos. Now, at the same time, what we've seen in latest developments is that the Foreign Office Pakistan Foreign Office has also said that they invite not only the Indian diplomats here, but also the international media, as well as the United Nations Observer Group for India and Pakistan, to come and visit this site where India says they have destroyed terrorist launch pads. So to understand and examine the implications of such actions, which are not new from India's side, because the violation of ceasefire across the line of control has been an ongoing issue for years and years. And how this affects regional stability, we will also find out, and the statements coming out from India, whether they are going to respond with map coordinates of this alleged terrorist militant hideout that they say they have attacked in the past few days, remains to be seen. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests who are joining in the Lahore studios. We have General Ghulam Mustafa. He's an analyst and a defense analyst. And also from Lahore, we'll be joined by Ambassador Shamshed Ahmad Khan, the former Foreign Secretary. And as well from Istanbul, an analyst joining us, Ms. Ruwa Shah. Welcome to all three of you here to Newswire. If I may start with you, Ambassador, the conversation once again taking place over the crossfire, the violation of ceasefire agreements between India and Pakistan, once again provoked by India. Do you see any kind of pattern here? Is this coincidental, considering that at the very moment the assembly elections of 2019 in Maharashtra and Haryana are taking place in India?
Absolutely. It is an extension of a pattern. And in fact, this pattern goes back even to the beginning of this century, when the 9/11 tragedy happened. So at that time, Modi's predecessors, Vajpayee, he decided that he should take advantage of the global anti-terror sentiment and bring Pakistan into pressure on the pretext of the issue of terrorism. So since then, they have been creating problems for Pakistan, and Modi, of course, has crossed all limits, and he has been staging different aggressive episodes. The last one was Balakot, and now this supposedly or alleged claim for having carried out a surgical strike into Pakistan, Azad Kashmir, is nothing but a figment of their imagination, the Indian Army Chief's imagination. And it is exactly the same way they did in Balakot, because there was no alleged
Then the general elections were about to begin in just a few days when the Balakot incident took place.
So it's the same story, same pattern, and they have tasted the intensity of our response once again, yet again, and that will happen whenever they again resort to this unprovoked aggression. But the problem, see, one has to look at the whole scenario that you refer to, the issue which is at the heart of all the problems, that is the Kashmir issue. And not only that, this whole story begins even before partition.
Right.
When they tried to prevent Pakistan's creation. They tried to preempt Pakistan's geographical configuration, the way
Right, so this is something you're saying, Ambassador, has a historical context also. This is nothing new. This pattern emerges pre-partition. As you mentioned, they're coming to you, General Mustafa. Besides just this pattern, this being something that is now become common knowledge, every time there's an election coming up or something major developing in India, suddenly the anti-Pakistan sentiment is used as their trump card.
I think when you look at the depraved kind of leadership that India is blessed with, it shouldn't be a surprise for us. Having done that 5 August thing, they thought that they have done something to Pakistan which Pakistan probably won't be able to respond. And they were hoping for Pakistan to react in a way that the international opinion would again be with them. Over the last 77 days now, India actually has been caught in its own trap, besides, of course, the election. They've caught their own trap. Pakistan, anti-Pakistan rhetoric is what their leadership thrives on. They have nothing else to talk about. Their economy is in dire states, and they are getting into trouble that way also. And the old narrative that the world was ready to buy, and they're trying to reinforce that Pakistan is sending in the terrorists to so-called create problem for them. And therefore, we can't lift the curfew. No, curfew can't be lifted. No, this is kind of catch-22. They lift the curfew, there's going to be a serious problem. And if they could, they would have done that. They've not been able to do that. Now, they're trying to further reinforce this kind of a narrative that Pakistan, like its olden days, has, it was reported, allegedly Pakistan was blamed for sending in the freedom fighters, so-called. Now, that kind of a narrative is now probably not being bought by the world. Much that the world wants to support India. That is unfortunately the issue. Otherwise, the world would have caught hold of India by throat. Much that India world wants to support, they don't have anything to prove, because these days it's very difficult to do such things and not get caught by them. On the ground, the situation is that on our side of the border, because of our people, there are free people, Pakistan can't stop them. They're working right up to the line of control. On the other side, what they've done is they've brought in Muslims with a 5 miles radius area. They brought in Muslims there. They know that Pakistan cannot fire indiscriminately like they're doing. Pakistan normally doesn't do that because civilians is not our target. While they keep doing that to us, and this is not the first time they killed the civilians. They thought this again will be like Balakot.
So you're saying that they've put in Muslim communities, forced Muslim communities to stay in live in the border area.
So Pakistan can't do anything now. It's very difficult for us.
So in a sense, General Mustafa, this is also taking away the limelight in here. Ms. Ruwa Shah, if I could get you in this conversation, do you feel that right now at this time, where soon after the United Nations General Assembly, where not just Pakistan, but several countries highlighted this issue of Indian-occupied Kashmir going unattended for way too long, that there is a genocide unfolding there, do you feel like these kind of incidents take away from what is happening in our very neighborhood?
See, the border situation between India and Pakistan has been the same. It is, I would like to call it a cold war or a small-scale war that has been going on between India and Pakistan for the last 75 years now. And whether you blame the Indian rhetoric, the Pakistan rhetoric that is there in place in India before the elections or before any event, as you mentioned, that is true. But that aside, there are human lives involved on that border, whether they are Muslim or not. They are human lives, and it's really difficult for both sides, whether it's the Pakistan side or the Indian border. Both the sides, it's happening at the cost of humans, and I think that everybody needs to consider this in the world, that there is a major risk of a major war in the South Asian region because of this, and we need to address the Kashmir issue to solve the problem of this small-scale war, basically. And that, yes, international attention has been gained in the world. We, like never before, we agree. There's a propaganda machine from the Indian side, because it's an occupier. What else do you expect from it? We need to create counter narratives of that. We need to have people as influential as them to counter their narratives at the international platforms.
But there's a concern here that, Ms. Shah, that we are talking about a process that will obviously take its due course, but what else does Pakistan need to do? Like when these kind of cross-border firings take place and Pakistan opens the door to not just journalists, but any third-party organization, even this time round, they've reached out to the 5 permanent members of the UN and said that you need to intervene here. You have to come and ask India that what and where is the proof when they say that they have attacked Pakistan in trying to eliminate these militant hideouts.
I know, I agree that it is a very long process that needs to be done, but this is one important step that needs to be done, and Kashmiris need to be involved in this. I'm sorry, but in the representation of Kashmir globally, Kashmiris are the least involved party everywhere, and we need to put those Kashmiri influential people on the positions of power across the global platforms.
Ambassador, is Pakistan working on the wrong narrative? As Ms. Shah says, it needs to do more.
No, I don't think we are working on a wrong narrative. I think Pakistan is doing whatever it can under the given circumstances. And I think Imran Khan has taken the right path. He knows the sensitivities of the situation, because at this time, the world is just not ready to accept any resort to militancy or kind of any infiltration inside Kashmir and instigation of fighting there. But of course, the Kashmiris are already fighting a very valiant war there, liberation war. So what Pakistan needs to do is to continue to maintain this momentum that Imran Khan's recent efforts at the United Nations resulted, because he was able to at least generate global awareness of the human rights abuses in Kashmir and the need for the world to intervene sooner rather than later. So I think those efforts need to be continued, and besides that, Pakistan also must focus on its own domestic weaknesses, whatever weaknesses they may be, to overcome those weaknesses and to strengthen Pakistan from inside, because Pakistan's strength means Kashmiri strength. If Pakistan remains weak from inside, then Kashmiri struggle remains weak. So I think it's a kind of a double-edged situation where Pakistan has to do many things now, and as a follow-up to Imran Khan's very successful visit to the United Nations, 6-day visit, where he met at least 70 people there and tried to put across the miseries and the hardships and sufferings of the Kashmiri people for the world to intervene. So besides that, I think we also have to pursue and explore some ways of getting some kind of tangible involvement of the world community. For example, yes, I have something in mind, and that is the International Court of Justice. Of course, you can't go to the International Court of Justice because that requires both parties to accept the jurisdiction. I think we have a way out. We must try, and that requires a lot of preparation. Advisory opinion from International Court of Justice, if it comes, a positive opinion comes from the Court of Justice, then the Kashmiri liberation movement will gain new strength, moral strength with that advisory opinion. Because in the past, I know all the liberation movements were reinforced and strengthened with such advisory opinions from the International Court of Justice. But that's not so easy, because it requires
it's not just about that both parties have to be part of this in terms of the International Court of Justice. It's also that the international community in itself, while there are other many political outfits that can intervene, like the UN Security Council held a meeting after 50 years, they can take action, but they do nothing, General Mustafa. Yet the conversation, as Ms. Ruwa Shah has highlighted, the Kashmiris need to be a part of this conversation. How can the Kashmiris be part of this conversation, considering that they have absolutely no access to the outside world?
When you say Kashmiris, there are two aspects to it. One is the Kashmiris who are already outside the jail. The diaspora. They've got the biggest jail in the world. They're the ones we can involve. And they can be involved, like our people from Azad Kashmir, the leadership Similarly, the people who are the diaspora across the world, and they're doing more than I think anybody else is doing. And they have to be involved in everything that we're doing. I mean, it has to be given the kind of pressure that we built up in the UN, that needed to be, that impetus has been lost somehow. Because I was expecting that by now we would have sent out something like 10, 12 written documents to the world capitals all over the world.
But there has been, the Pakistani leadership has continuously been in touch with these world leaders, has been on the phone with these world leaders, constantly apprising them of the situation there. That's not enough. No,
that's not enough. I mean, we need to reach out to the universities, to the other institutions that exist all over the world, the think tanks that exist all over the world. We have to reach out to everybody. Because this kind of a diplomatic offensive that Pakistan started off in UN, this impetus has to be built up, and that has to be continued at that level. And it has to be sustained at that level. And for that, you need to have a proper desk, as it was decided for Pakistan to have that. And then make a campaign kind of a... I mean, right. the way you launch a military campaign.
But it's very convenient, I feel, almost, that while we are all aware of where the shortcomings are of what the Pakistani government should do, what is the UN leadership supposed to do now? Are they supposed to sit on the side? Sorry, let me just quickly get... Ms. Shah, you want to make a comment here?
Yeah, I was just wanted to make sure that, see, I did not say that Pakistan is not doing enough or Imran Khan is not doing enough. We are really thankful for what Pakistan has been doing. It's the only state that has been helping us morally and diplomatically to raise the voice about Kashmir anywhere in the world. That is there. But what I mean is that now that we only have you, let's just make it together, like involve Kashmiris at international platforms, academics. I don't know, we need to get involved in conversations with people who are Nobel laureates or who are at the position of powers, influential people, and we need to have Kashmiris look at the media, you know, this coverage that happened in the international media this time is only because there are Kashmiris in almost every news outlets out there. So that is a strong point, but that's only media. We need a very good system in the law. We need good lawyers, we need good engineers, we need good people everywhere, Kashmiris everywhere. Look at Palestinians. If you see around the world, there are Palestinians in almost every organization, influential organization in the world.
And yet the cause of Palestine continues to take a backbench here. As you must have seen, if you were to compare the two situations, Kashmir is actually more on the forefront. Yeah. It has been more on the forefront. And then considering also...
Palestine is also... It's a sacred cause for the entire Muslim world because of the Al-Quds. We are not that. But then Kashmir is also very different from Palestine. Why I give a Palestinian example is that they have very successfully been able to make the entire world know there is a problem in Palestine. But Kashmir, I'm sorry, nobody knows. I'm living in Turkey, that nobody knows here where Kashmir is on the map. And it's not only, I don't blame them, I also blame myself. I also blame the entire way that we have been dealing with this till now. We need to find new strategies. We need to rebuild the strategy from the bottom. Now.
And it should also then apply to Kashmiri diaspora altogether across the world, what they are doing in unison in order to bring this, what is unfolding in Indian-occupied Kashmir to the forefront. We saw, though, at the same time, there were protests taking place all across the world, whether it's Houston, it's London, it's some other part of Europe, but the conversation goes both ways. So don't you think, Ms. Shah, that right now what really begs the question is that what is the world leadership? How is it responding? Especially when we see these kind of cross-firing take place where, again, innocent people are being killed, unprovoked, indiscriminate firing.
Right. The world leadership will obviously be like this, but at least we have been able to get Turkey talking about Kashmir right now. I mean, Pakistan has been able to get Turkey to talk about Kashmir at least.
And Malaysia and Indonesia.
And Malaysia and Indonesia, but Turkey being one of the most powerful among those, I'm saying, putting it in perspective here. And we need to involve other countries. Not only, we need to involve Africa. We have no voice from Africa, for example. There are so many Muslim countries in Africa that really are interested in supporting the Kashmir cause.
So more voices need to be brought to this forum. Shah, thank you so much. We're running out of time. I want to come to you quickly, Ambassador. Another issue that we haven't really got to the bottom of, with this recent cross-firing, again we see ceasefire violations taking place by India, then these have continued unabated, especially since 2017. How long is Pakistan expected to put up with this? Haven't we done enough in terms of offering an olive branch to India on various occasions?
In the first instance, I must correct the impression in the earlier part of the segment. I don't know how did you reach this conclusion that Kashmiris are not part of the conversation. Well, I have been involved in dialogue on Kashmir for a long time, at different stages, at different levels. And every time Kashmiris were part of the dialogue in a unique way, that before we went into discussions and dialogue with the Indians, we always consulted the Kashmiris. In Pakistan, and if we were visiting India for that dialogue, then we would always hold a meeting with Kashmiri leaders in the occupied Kashmir. So this is absolutely a wrong impression that Kashmiris have not been involved. They have been part of this discourse invariably, other than when the Indians were stubborn enough not to let the occupied Kashmiri leadership meet Pakistanis, dignitaries visiting Delhi for any kind of discussion. So please correct yourself that Kashmiris are an integral part of any effort for a resolution of Kashmir dispute. And basically, as far as we are concerned, we always involved them.
But Ambassador, I was referring to the Kashmiris right now who are under complete communication blackout. They are under severe curfews, and this is entering their third month where they have been in this situation, while the BJP-led government likes to peddle this narrative where they're inviting tourists to the region. What about those who are behind this indigenous movement itself? I was referring to those categorically.
Well, even the Indian leaders were not allowed to go visit Kashmir.
Right,
so
absolutely.
How can they be involved in any kind of discourse, conversation?
And maybe that is the narrative that needs to be brought in. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm sorry to cut you there. We are running out of time. Quickly, General Mustafa, coming quickly to the question about propaganda, something that Ms. Shah also raised, that this propaganda has been also highlighted by recently a news publication in the Middle East, which talks about how Indian media is peddling this hatred towards the largest minority in India itself, Muslims. And when you see this kind of narrative being identified by countries across the world, then it really brings into question what is the credibility of them saying that we are looking out for the Kashmiris in the valley.
Actually, I mean, Pakistan must reconcile to the fact that the international community is not concerned with Kashmir per se. The only concern is that India must be protected, Indian interest must be protected, and the other Western interest must be protected. I mean, that's a very frank, brutal way of putting it across. Pakistan, whatever Pakistan is doing, whatever Kashmiris are doing, it has to be taken to the next level. Only then probably they will start looking at it as a problem which needs to be solved immediately. It's a human tragedy. It can balloon into anything that you can talk about.
Right.
The other issue is that within Pakistan, you find that the last 2 weeks have been gobbled up by what news do you have about Kashmir in Pakistan? I mean, our media.
But that's the very purpose of this sort of an exercise, isn't it? Unprovoked firing. Suddenly, we've got enough of our own issues on our plate, and then we are trying to protect our borders from and allegations from the Indian side that they are attacking militant launch pads within Pakistan. I mean, how far can they take this narrative? When is the UN and other leaderships going to step in? When will the United Nations Organization for India and Pakistan, or the Observer Group, be allowed to walk in and see for themselves whether they're militant hideouts or not?
Frankly, Ayza, only when the world knows that Pakistan will not take it anymore. And next step, Pakistan is going to go for it. Only then the world will come to this rescue. Otherwise, the world is probably looking at us as some people who are begging for peace. I mean, every time we are talking about peace in the region, Pakistan is not responsible. Pakistan is not only responsible for the peace of the region. There are other countries who are responsible. The day the world realizes that Pakistan has had enough and pushed to, it's already with a back its wall, it has to go for it, and it will go for it, that's when the world will start looking at it in a different way.
That in itself is a big concern. Also, that when the world reacts, when Pakistan has had enough. Now, with that, we're going to take a quick short break. Don't go away. We'll be back with more news from around the world. Welcome back. You're watching Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. Now, today marks the 4th day of nationwide protests in Lebanon as hundreds of thousands of people are out on the streets demanding an overhaul of the government. The Lebanese Prime Minister, Saad Hariri, has pledged reforms. Several government ministers have resigned on Sunday, but despite these moves, protests still continue. To find out more details in this report.
Protests against tax reforms and austerity measures began in Lebanon last week. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese have taken to the streets, united behind one cause, and that is political change. The measures included charges on calls using the social media app WhatsApp. Even though the measure was quickly reversed by the government, it did not satisfy the public. People are protesting against high unemployment, poor infrastructure, electricity shortages, and perceived corruption. Dani Murtada has been protesting on the streets of Beirut since the 17th of October.
The energy is present. When I see this scene and all people from all religions coming down to the streets, this is energy by itself. When I see the Sunnis, the Shiites, the Christians, and the Druze from all regions, they don't care where from, how, and why. All united with one hand. This is alone energy.
Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has proposed a tax-free solution to the country's economic woes. On Sunday, the Prime Minister agreed on a package of reforms with government partners to ease the economic crisis. But this will not be an easy task, considering the country's public debt stands at $86 billion. According to Lebanon's finance ministry, it amounts to over 150% of the national GDP. The demonstrations are being termed the largest in years. Lebanon's population of above 6 million has a complex communal makeup. Shia, Sunni, Muslims, Christians, and Druze are the main population groups. Since 2011, Lebanon is also hosting a large number of Syrian refugees, approximately around 1.5 million people. But protesters have been united under the national flag, breaking the sectarian divide in the country. Meanwhile, Lebanon's influential Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has said that he does not want the government to resign.
So that gave you a snapshot of the situation in Lebanon. Now, on Friday, Prime Minister Hariri gave a 72-hour deadline to his coalition partners to agree on a solution for the country's economic woes without imposing any new taxes. Now, the coalition government, as we understand it, is poised to approve a package of economic reforms in an attempt to sort of satiate the biggest protest it's seen in many years. To understand the situation on the ground, to see what the government is preparing to do, and in terms of especially the debt, which right now Lebanon is under, how it will handle that. We will be talking to our guests to learn more. Let me introduce who we have with us today. Mr. Ahmad Jamal Al-Ahmad is joining us from Ghana. He is a consultant in strategic intelligence in U.S., in the Middle East as well as in the U.S. Now, we also are joined by a journalist on the ground in Beirut, in Lebanon. We have with us Mr. Habib Battah. Welcome to both of you to the show. Let me start with you, Mr. Battah, to get an understanding of how today is unfolding, considering that the coalition government is with Mr. Hariri coming up with these reforms. They are expected to approve them, but yet we see the protests going on all across. Tell us a little about what is unfolding today.
Well, the protest is continuing. It's a work week and it's shut down like a weekend. The whole country is shut down. All the highways are shut down. There are protests in big towns and small towns from the north to the south of the country. It's an incredible outpouring of emotion and exhaustion from a people who have been ruled by a ruling class that is elitist. Many of them are warlords who actually fought in the war and killed many people. People have put up with their rule for years and years and years because they had to be quiet because these are armed men. And we have seen some bodyguards shooting at protesters. So it's a very lawless situation in Lebanon. It's been for a very long time. People are fed up with it. And they're continuing to demand
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Battah. We're seeing videos of protesters out in the streets in various parts of the city. Give us an understanding of the numbers. Today is the 5th day of the protest. Are the numbers steadily increasing? Are they the same makeup, or has there been any change?
As I said, the numbers are all across the country. It's very hard to count. I mean, there are protests in places you would never expect, in small villages and neighborhoods and suburban neighborhoods, in mountain villages. Strategic roads are closed across the country. There are probably at least 1 million people on the streets in different parts of the country, if you add them all up. It could be even more than that. It's very hard to even count that there's so many people in so many places. It's just such an incredible scene. Last night I was coming home and the entire highway was a parking lot full of cars. You can just imagine a highway full of thousands of cars.
Right. But you also mentioned there are concerns about the kind of security being provided to the protesters, or the kind of police cordoning off these areas, cordoning off the protesters. You said there were some incidents of where the police or the security officials attacked the protesters.
Yeah, the police presence is almost absent completely. I mean, the army is kind of watched from the sidelines, but it's like young people have just taken over the country and the government has just given up in some ways, and you don't see very many police at all. I think they're very worried of having confrontation with people, so they've kind of, not let the police interact. But there have been some cases of police beating protesters. But what's more scary is, again, these people who rule Lebanon, these former warlords, have bodyguards that are armed and have shot people. And this is not a police action or an army action. We have paramilitary forces in Lebanon where political parties have armed people who work for them and will shoot at a crowd in the air indiscriminately.
And that is one of the biggest demands that the protesters have been saying. They've been uniting behind Mr. Ahmad. This question is to you, which is what analysts are saying is also unprecedented in a community with such a diverse makeup. Is the political change, asking for a revolution, a complete change? What do you think is that makes it unprecedented the most?
Thank you for having me. It's not that it's unprecedented. These moods, these attitudes have been building up for the past few decades. And with each protest, with each demonstration, they become stronger, they become more courageous, and their demands have actually become more focused. Now, we have to understand Lebanon's system. It's a structural corruption, and you have layers upon layers upon layers of corruption, starting from the municipal level, the local level, to the city councils, to the municipal councils, to the regional, then to the national government. Mm-hmm. So what the people are asking is not so much as unprecedented. It's just been decades in the making. It just was triggered by the WhatsApp taxes and the recent fires that the government was wholly inadequate to respond to.
But these demands, while these demands that they have, they're also asking for a complete change of the political leadership. Are there other options available? Or as Mr. Battah highlighted, that these are warlords, they've been the ruling elite for decades upon decades, that there isn't any other option left?
Well, let's differentiate between changing the political elite as opposed to changing the government. The government needs to stay, the administrative part needs to stay in order to be able to administer these critical services, utilities, and things that the poor people depend upon. Now, the political elite, that regime needs to change because they've been in power for decades. You're talking at least since the 90s. And as Mr. Battah said, these are former warlords with blood on their hands. But at the same time, each of these warlords, these political parties, have their base that votes for them no matter what. So you have maybe 30 to 40% of the population, hardcore base, that votes for these people, holding up, in a sense, handcuffing the other 50 to 60%. And it seems now maybe this may be changing only because all sides have begun to get fed up with the nepotism, with the corruption.
Okay, so Mr. Ahmad, stay with us. Battah, if quickly, they're talking about, the government is talking about a reform package. Can you give us an idea of what these proposals are going to be?
They proposed to cancel the new taxes that they put on people to pay for the debt of Lebanon. And let's remember, the debt of Lebanon is incurred through a lot of corruption and big projects after the civil war of reconstruction. So people didn't benefit from those projects, and now they're paying for them. So the government has decided to take a pay cut. I think 50% cut they proposed for the ministers. But really, this doesn't really go that far for people, because we don't have a tax system in Lebanon that tax the rich millionaires and billionaires who run this country. These yachts, incredible yachts in Lebanon, and the most, fanciest houses and villas and multi-million-dollar apartments, where the cheapest apartment is $5 million. The amount of wealth, the wealth gap in this country is incredible. About half of the country's wealth is controlled by 0.3% of the country. It's not even 1%, it's 0.3%. So we have less than a 1% that rules Lebanon. So, these taxes and these proposals, people see that as very cosmetic. They want to see heads roll. They don't want to see these same faces anymore. We've seen the same families for 30, 40, 100 years sometimes. The same families in power. People are
so
just
there is a huge trust deficit from the same leader ruling. It's a different face, but the same family. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Battah, for giving us your insight there, what's unfolding there in Beirut. Now, Mr. Ahmad, protesters, they're demanding also what seems like a change in the political system, which, as I understand it, is set in a way to balance the power between the different sort of religious communities and sects. Is that the case? Is that a fair assessment?
No, what people are asking now is an overhaul of the entire structure of the system. No more sectarian, no more confessional-based political system. People want to vote. They're conscious. People want to vote for technocrats, people who understand what the system needs, understand how to govern, and understand the economic side of it. These political leaders now are businessmen. They go to work in government as businessmen, and dividing up the ministries, dividing up the spoils of the budget. So people are tired of it. They understand that the reforms also that they're putting in place right now are just, I would say, window dressing. Cutting 50% of the salaries, this should have been done decades ago. Okay. And even the idea of taxing WhatsApp never been proposed. The audacity that it would be proposed, it only targets the middle class and the lower class, the poor, not the rich. Okay. And it shows you the indifference, the disconnect between the reality on the ground and the political leadership.
Okay, thank you so much. Jamal Ahmad joining us there from Ghana now. Welcoming another voice, this time from Paris, a journalist joining us, Mr. Van Meguerditchian. Welcome to Newswire. We're trying to understand not only how these protests got so big, but also at the same time, as Mr. Battah just highlighted, the economy is in shambles. Just the debt to GDP ratio is 151%. In fact, 153% by some reports of the GDP is what the debt of Lebanon is. How did it get so bad?
Well, someone asked me the exact same question yesterday, which is why now? Why is this happening right now? And why things got so bad in Lebanon economically? Well, to put it in context, the leadership in the country, this political class that has been ruling the country for decades now, they've been only concerned about doing certain concessions amongst themselves to have some sort of an agreement on a coalition. And this coalition included rival groups in the country, included those who had put the country's interests first 20 years ago, 15 years ago, in different circumstances, and those groups in the country who were literally not concerned about what is going on in the country or the economy of the country or the well-being of the Lebanese people. One of those key groups that is in control of the country today, the de facto leadership in the country today, is Hezbollah's leadership. The Hezbollah's leadership it got so big in the past 10 years that it exceeded Lebanese borders. It exceeded the borders and took the problem to another level, meaning isolated Lebanon totally from the international community, isolated Lebanon completely from all international institutions that were willing to give some trust to the Lebanese institutions.
Wasn't it
to help them.
also, President, it was also an effort by President Hariri himself to employ this sort of disassociation so that Lebanon would stay away from other countries in the Middle East and their conflicts? And wasn't he also to blame for this?
Of course, definitely. To take this situation back into history, the only period of time in Lebanon's history where the country had thrived, developed, and its institutions were working, it was when Lebanon was disassociating itself from the conflicts in the region. The only time that Lebanon benefited from a certain stability and development.
But now it's not only involved in all that is happening in the Middle East, it's also shouldering the burden of 1.5 million Syrian refugees. And that's clearly taking a toll on the 6 million population.
Of course, the refugees issue came 6-7 years ago with the start of the civil war in Syria. When back then the Lebanese were working to find a solution for the Palestinian refugees who were stuck without papers in Lebanon, who were living under extremely difficult conditions. And while they were looking for a solution for this, the Syrian crisis started, and the Syrian war gave Lebanon all those refugees who were living in extremely catastrophic circumstances.
But there's also a problem here in terms of, sorry, I'm cutting you there. We're running out of time. I quickly want to cover this point also. While the protesters, the demonstrators are demanding a complete change of the regime, they're very unhappy with the rulers. But the question really is, who would then take their place? Is there a political party, any leadership ready to take on the role of the government?
I think that question should come afterwards. What is important today is that this political class that has promised the Lebanese reform and development has given Lebanese more immigration abroad, has given Lebanese families more breakdown, has given Lebanese families more debt. And if this political class has promised all these times in the past that they will find a solution for the country's problems, they have given them only pain. And today, this political class, the people on the street, they are asking for them to leave. Once they're gone, the whole system needs to be changed. Just like the Prime Minister Hariri himself, in his latest speech, he said everything in the system needs to be changed. But he is not the person capable of doing this because he is a hostage of the system itself. And Hariri himself has proven in the past few years that his main interest is to be in power. And to be in power today for Hariri is to be in alliance with Hezbollah that has no interest in the country whatsoever.
Then from what you're saying, it really seems that the reform package that the government is trying to get approved today is pretty much going to be a waste of time.
What the government is proposing today is too little and too late. Most people are asking a complete breakdown of the system. Most people are fed up with the system. They have given them a lot of chances. They have given some trust in them, but it hasn't worked. And it's time for a change for most of these people. I don't think the protests will come down. On the contrary, I think the streets will be more full of people in the next few days.
All right. Thank you so much, Meguerditchian, the journalist joining us from Paris, giving us his insight into this development which is taking place in Lebanon. The protests continue on the 5th day as the government tries to get a reform package approved. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for Newswire today. We will be seeing you tomorrow with the latest updates. Till then, goodbye.